The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. Today, I have a special episode featuring my interview with retired police sergeant and cold case investigator, Troy A. Hillman. Now, you've heard about his new book, Chasing Down the Zombie Hunter, which was just released in October. So I highly recommend this book because it delves into a serial killer and one that not a lot of true crime fans may have heard of, the Canal Killer. Well, in his life, Troy didn't take the most conventional path to law enforcement. He attended the University of Illinois, where he earned a degree in accounting and became a certified public accountant working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, a prestigious accounting firm. And he was highly respected and on the partner track, but it just wasn't his passion. So in 1997, he decided to pursue law enforcement, which he had been enamored of since he was little and watching TV cop shows, and he entered the police academy after being hired by the Phoenix Police Department. Troy did the usual rookie stint on patrol, but eventually transitioned to investigating cold cases, and there were over 2,500 of them at the time. Now, as a detective, his zeal for hunting down elusive serial killers drove him, leading his cold case unit to evolve into an elite squad of homicide detectives. Together, they solved hundreds of murders dating back to the 1970s. Well, after 24 years of service, during which he received numerous awards and commendations from supervisors and citizens, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Troy retired. Throughout his career, he also found time to earn his MBA in finance and a master's degree in educational leadership. Chasing Down the Zombie Hunter is his first book. So please join me in welcoming Troy A. Hillman to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
Listen, I am very, very grateful. Well, I was aware of your book, but then I saw that you were presenting at the Cold Case Institute. And I was like, I know him. I've read his book. So it was really neat to be able to see you and watch your presentation there.
Thank you.
Listen, I want to ask you something. Something occurred to me. You started out your career in kind of an odd place to wind up in law enforcement. You became a CPA. Now, the skills that you developed as a CPA, how did that impact your ability to do the cold case investigations?
Yeah, so I didn't really think about it at the time, but there is a correlation between a CPA, the detail, the organization, which kind of overlays on the cold case. You're sifting through clues, you're looking for things that other people missed. Some of these cases have been worked multiple times, so you're just looking for anything, again, that's missed or at the application of new technology. Because as you know, DNA is evolving every single day and they're getting better and better. So yeah, there's a definite correlation. And again, I didn't know it at the time, but it would definitely be a nice parlay.
Well, you put together this elite team. So I think you had that skill set. Other people brought different skills in, and it looked like it was really an ideal relationship there.
Yeah, they all had their quirks, but they all worked together great. And we all had that underlying passion. And I always describe it as kind of this bulldog mentality. I used to have an English bulldog, and they're just they never let go of the rope. They're just so intense. And that's kind of the way I describe our team. The odds were stacked against us.
Well, definitely. You had what, 2,500 cold cases at that time?
Yeah, 2,500 and growing. Every year they're adding, about 100 to the stack. So yeah, it was massive. And even with five detectives and me, that was, 500 cases a piece to try to manage, and all the family members calling in and wanting updates and just trying to review all those cases, trying to move them forward, trying to handle that. And again, I go back to my CPA inventory. It's like, how do we keep track of all this inventory? How do we quantify it? How to best work it and do it most efficiently?
Bet you had a few spreadsheets.
Yeah, love them spreadsheets.
You were in Chicago and then you wound up in Phoenix. So I'm wondering, were you aware of the canal killer cases?
No, I was. I just wanted out of the cold weather. I did a ride along in a city that was not Chicago, but nearby, and I didn't want to get out of the cruiser at 4 a.m. because I think it was -10 wind chill, and so I wanted to go warm. But I didn't really realize how warm. So Phoenix, putting on a Kevlar vest and going out there in a dark uniform was, I just sweat profusely all the time. But it was a great experience. I'm glad I did.
You kind of went from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes.
So here you have 2,500 cases. You're not from Phoenix then, so this isn't something that you had heard about the murders when they take place. What attracted you to looking at that particular case? Because you didn't, well, I'm sure you were investigating the other cases as well, but what drew you to that one in particular?
In 2011, we got a media records request, and part of my job as the sergeant leader of the team was to try to take as much off my detectives' backs, so to speak, as possible, so that they didn't get inundated in the minutia. I wanted them out solving crimes. So my job as a sergeant was to look at some of these public records requests and try to sift through them. And there's always a delicate balance between transparency and then also holding back information, because we don't want to give away everything we have on the case, because we have a lot of false confessions. We have a lot of people that waste our time and do that kind of thing. So anyway, I dove into this case. I printed it out. I always joke, the commander secretary who's in charge of toner and paper kind of chastised me. She's like, "Troy, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm printing out the canal murders." And they were just absolutely massive, reams and reams of paper. And I kind of poured through them, and I was just horrified. I was horrified for these girls. I was horrified for their families. I was horrified that we'd never caught this guy.
Yeah, I can imagine that one of the things that you hear over and over is the concern for the families. They've lost these loved ones. They want to know an update. They desperately want to know what happened. So these cases are heartbreaking. But here you've got literally a copy room full of reams and reams of paper. And now you start trying to make sense of this.
Yeah, and I always add a lot of the supplements didn't exactly flow smoothly like a book would. A nice chapter, this happens and then this happens. There would be, patrol officer would see this, and then the detective would write this, and then crime scene detective would write this. And it was just a kind of for lack of better terms, it was a jumbled mess. And just trying to figure out what happened, who, how, what, why, when, that kind of thing was mind-boggling.
Yeah. Well, you said you had was it 1,000 people on the creepy canal list that you had to go through?
Yeah, so the creepy canal list really wasn't in any kind of tangible form. And I'm lucky I had a really organized detective named Mark, who was kind of tasked with getting us organized. And so he was able to work with our computer services folks and put together this list. And it was, of all things, an Excel spreadsheet, which I got excited about. But I really wasn't excited because the sheer volume of creepy dudes on this list that ranged from, some of them were just kind of downright silly. A guy was seen with a samurai sword the night of the murder, nothing else. And then other ones were very pointed, and we needed to take another look at. So, but just sifting through the sheer volume of names, and you don't want to miss anybody, and then kind of write them off. And what we were ultimately trying to do is figure out who we needed to go get their DNA. And that was kind of step one. And then it was like, okay, now we know we want to get this guy's DNA. Where is he? And it can be all over the country. And some of them were all over the country. And there's different states have different thresholds for getting DNA, especially on a decades old cold case. So that was a challenge in of itself.
Did you find that the cooperation there was forthcoming? Did you have to work it? Because when I hear talk about older cases, I hear always that how territorial law enforcement can be. You're right across the county line, but they're not going to share their information, even though the MOs match up. And has it gotten better?
Yeah, I mean, I think in particular terms to this case, whenever we would call somebody, another agency, and say, hey, we're coming back to, say, Maryland, or we're coming back to another state back east, and they would be very helpful, and they would try the best. But the problem was trying to get a magistrate or judge to sign off on the levels of threshold. Ours is in Arizona is pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but it's reasonable suspicion. So we can have reasonable suspicion and go get somebody's DNA. Whereas probable cause is what's needed in other states, and that's a higher threshold. And that's basically saying, hey, I have enough other stuff saying that this guy did it. And in this case, we were just looking at, hey, he's on this list, on the canal list, he's creepy, he's got these things that we think that the killer could have done before, and we need his DNA. So, but in terms of overall communication, I think there does need to be a better dialogue, especially on cold cases, because the serial killers are in particular, hopping from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, doing awful things, and then nobody's talking to one another. So I'm hoping that becomes more widespread.
Well, that's good to know that at least there's some communication going on. It would be better to smooth that out, I guess. Now, you were chasing a lot of these creepy guys, and there were some that were really looking pretty good. And then it wasn't. You'd collect the DNA. How do you keep going? I mean, you talk about that dog with the bone thing, but how did you keep going after letdown?
Yeah, it was a roller coaster ride, and I think it took a toll on each member of the team. But again, it comes back to perseverance, and then also we were blessed to have some what I call the heroes come in and help us, the experts from the VDOC Society and the genetic genealogist, and I know we'll probably get to that. But we, definitely it was a roller coaster 3.5 years for sure. And there were times when I'd go home and I'd tell my wife, I don't think we're ever going to solve this thing. And we had a lot of outside support from our spouses, families. I think a lot of people don't realize that detectives, officers are human, and seeing all this stuff, this bad stuff, day in, day out. And it's not like a Hollywood or Netflix. It's definitely real, and it happened to somebody. So trying to digest all that and then also keep our minds safe and keep our families safe is tough.
Well, you say it's real. It's happening actually in real time, which winds up being 3.5 years of scrutiny, researching, calling, connecting, getting DNA, processing that. You mentioned VDOC, which I happen to be a huge fan because I'm in Pennsylvania. But so tell me about how that came about.
Basically, William, one of my detectives, a mother on another case had contacted him and said, hey, would you use this on my son's case? Unfortunately, that case was you have to float that by the VDOC Society. They only have unfortunately, so much time to look at cases. But we decided that the actually canal murders would be more appropriate, and we kind of sent that to them, and they were willing to look at it. And that was a kind of a career highlight for me and the two detectives that went with me. Just kind of blew our minds.
It sounded like it was nerve-wracking.
Yeah, there's brilliant, absolutely brilliant upper echelon crime fighters in that group, but there are a lot of, I don't know, there's some certain degree of bickering. There's a certain amount of ego, and again, that not in any way disparaging them. They're phenomenal people, but one in particular was very eccentric and kind of took us under his wing. But the initial meeting of him, Richard Walter, was somewhat unpleasant.
It didn't sound like it was fun. Here you've gone through this huge PowerPoint where you've got all these important details and information, and you're trying to get through it. And he's like, let me see the pictures. Like, oh my God. Well, there goes all of our preparation.
Yeah, I don't think he means anything. That was just his way. And initially, because he came up to me after the presentation and basically was just asking, had a napkin with what he called the helix on it, and it basically progressed to which cannibalism, and was going through it and excited about it, and it just was just completely different. I think during the meeting, he just wanted to get to the pictures, so that was that was his deal.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's his process. And listen, he can be as esoteric as he wants if he helped you solve this.
Yeah, and that he did. He was a huge piece, and obviously he was working with the other side, the science of it. But he's interviewed over I think 2,500 sexual sadists in the Michigan prison system, and he really knows how they develop, how they operate, how they think, and can get in their heads.
See, that's the part. You're reading a book about catching a serial killer and gruesome murders, and you say that's the part I really enjoyed. Enjoyed with air quotes around it, but I did, because he was an AE, right? The anger excitation killer. And that's the thing that draws me in, is trying to understand why these people do what they do. And when I have enough information, I try to explain that to my listeners, whatever case we happen to be doing. So that to me was absolutely fascinating. And here he tells you that this guy is in your files. He's in there.
Yeah, I mean, he basically said you're looking for a Bundy or Dahmer. He felt that these are the most interesting of his subtypes. He felt that they were extremely intelligent. They usually engage in artistic activities like photography and or drawing, but they're usually off the charts in intelligence. And he kind of had this laugh about him, and he kind of said, good luck, dear boy. Because I was offended at first, and I put this in the book, that he's kind of seemed like he was putting down what we had done. And I was very proud of, the Phoenix Police Department and everything we had poured into the initial investigation. The original investigators did a great job, and then what we had done. But he said, that won't help you find this chap, or however he referred to him as. So, and ultimately he's right. They don't teach this in Homicide 101, how to catch a serial killer. We had to go to experts and try to figure it out.
Well, John Douglas has said, to understand the artist, you have to look at the art. So it is a ticklish thing to try to get into the headspace of someone who can do something so horrendous. Now, we haven't mentioned the victims, and I don't want to not mention them. Angela Brosso, has her life going. The two things they seem to have in common. The other was Melanie Bernas. They liked bike rides. They go out on an evening bike ride to get a little exercise, ride down by the canal, and their lives are snuffed out. So absolutely awfully.
Yeah, I mean, it's tragic. Both girls were vibrant, athletic, beautiful women that, had their whole lives ahead of them, would have had, probably been married and had, children, and that was just taken from them and their families. And I, having two daughters of my own, I can't imagine, what that feels like to go through. And every member of the team had kids. And so seeing this, almost, they were our kind of adopted kids, so to speak. We're going to try to solve this for them and get them some answers. And people use the word closure a lot. I don't think there's ever true closure, but there are answers and some form of justice that we can try to give them.
Yeah. Well, enter Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick. She's going to do forensic genetic genealogy. And this is before people even knew about genetic forensic genealogy.
Yeah, so this is 2014. A lot of the notoriety has been given to the Golden State Killer and them using genetic genealogy in 2018. But really, Phoenix PD, and again, it doesn't matter in itself because we both caught serial killers. But Phoenix PD was kind of groundbreaking, pioneering in my team and using this technology to basically solve a serial killer investigation. And it really never happened before. So Just to get it approved was a nightmare because it just wasn't known. And a lot of times, cold cases, you need that cutting edge stuff. You really need any help you can to solve these cases. So we were completely on board with it. It was $750, which is a nano speck in the budget of the city of Phoenix. But it took a lot of pushing and prodding to get that moved through.
Well, think about it. It does kind of sound like voodoo.
Yeah, yeah, the voodoo or witchcraft or
Yeah, you're going to do what with a bunch of, symbols and letters all put together, and you're going to check out 23andMe. What are you doing? I mean, now we can reflect back, but you're right. This is cutting edge stuff. No one had heard about it in 2018 when Golden State Killer hit, and then it was like all over the place. But you're right. You were the cutting edge. I almost feel like you were doing the test to see if this could be applied to serial killers.
yeah, and that's what we told Colleen. We're like, hey, if you just do this on the house, I'll get it approved quickly because I've been a sergeant for a long time and I knew how things worked. And if there's no real money attached and we ensured the powers to be that no information on the murders would get out or it couldn't be used nefariously, then, what's to lose? But I knew this would kind of make her career. And dang, I mean, she was already doing great work for the military and a couple other law enforcement agencies on smaller cases. But she's awesome. She's a brilliant woman, and I have nothing but accolades to shower her with. She's phenomenal.
That is one of my dream interviews, is to sit down and speak with her. And as far as I know, she does not have a book. And I'm like, Colleen, you're killing me.
Yeah, not yet, but she's a big part of a chunk of mine, and she's definitely, yes, helped law enforcement in so many ways.
I came across her when I did Lindsay Wade's book, In My DNA. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of involvement there with genetic genealogy, and Colleen came into it. That was, I think, the first time I'd really heard of her by name. I think there were other cases she was involved with. She wasn't necessarily mentioned. But she is my hero. And she gives you the name.
Yeah, I didn't know what to think. I had a baby at the time. We were with extended family. It was over the holidays, and she calls me, and I step out, and she's like, Troy, I think his surname is Miller. And I said, well, when I was joking, it's not quite Smith, which is all over the place. Miller, I think, was the seventh most common name in the United States at the time. But it was a start. And then it popped into my brain what Richard kind of, the haunting words of, he's in your files, he's in your files. So I scrambled and asked Mark, the organization detective, hey, would you pull those files from the basement? And he goes, here you go. And there were 5 files of Miller. And the rest is history.
Yeah, you worked your way through. Was that the file? Was an inch thick, and start looking at this and red flags started popping up.
Yeah, and it was, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I called an immediate squad meeting to sit down and kind of go through this information and ultimately try to get his DNA.
Oh, that was quite an adventure getting that too. But here's a guy who drives around. Describe his car. I mean, there's a reason the book is named what it's named.
Right. So the car was basically an auctioned police car. It was like an LAPD black and white, and it had been kind of, for lack of better terms, tricked out to basically look like this zombie hunter. And it said zombie hunter on the back and on the sides, and it looked like a patrol car. And it had an actual mannequin in the back that was bloody, and it had blood on the, I believe, on one of the driver's side door, rear door. So it was just definitely a very fantasy, and it attracted a lot of attention. Officers would periodically catch it speeding and pull it over. The perpetrator was smart enough to basically not use the same lights colors, which it's against the law in Arizona to have certain color lights, which mimic what actual law enforcement has. So he was smart enough to not have those. So he really didn't get jammed up in any kind of impersonating a police officer scenario, but was well known as the zombie hunter. He was kind of a local legend of a sort.
Yeah, because that's perfectly normal to run around in a zombie hunter car that looks like a police car with a bloody mannequin in the back. Gee, what? No red flags there at all, right? Like,
yeah, no. I was just going to say, it was in steampunk and Comic Con, and there's a lot of great people that are engaged in that, and that's kind of their jam, and that's totally fine. And we've never meant to opine negatively on them. It was just Brian was using it as a way to hide in plain sight.
Exactly. Exactly. So he, zombie hunter. You don't have to get into too graphic details, but his MO to me was very, very obvious.
Yeah, basically he would engage in some a blitz attack. He would drive a knife into the victim's back, which in the same spot, which immediately incapacitate them. He would drive it into their heart, and then he would basically drag them and then complete his fantasy. And he took kind of different fantasies on our two victims. One was more just extremely brutal. He severed the head. He almost cut her in half. And our second victim, Melanie, he basically redressed, carved things into her and that kind of stuff. So that was something that we focused on today. We really have no idea even today, that's his fantasy. We don't understand why he did what he did.
Well, he knows why he did what he did, and he enjoys it. He would have kept going eventually.
Yeah, and I mean that was something that an FBI profile said back in the '90s, which killer would not stop, and it just kind of I kept looping that over in my mind as like killer would not stop, and I'm like, well, where the heck is he? Where did he go? I mean, we had this two horrible, horrific, two of the worst murders that Arizona's ever had in '92 and '93, and then it's just nothing. So what did he do before? What did he do after? And that was just a overarching mystery. I think Miller's fascinating. People are kind of dismiss him because he doesn't have the perceived, I hate to say this, but body count. But I think there are many more we just can't seem to figure out because, again, we talked about you don't stop. There had to be, yeah, maybe in '95 he got married and maybe he stopped and had his daughter in '97 and then he went to Washington. We know he did some dastardly deeds there, but he came back here in 2013. There's a girl in Tempe, Adrian Salinas, that was beheaded. We kind of settled with them and said, hey, we think Miller may have been involved, but again, it's their jurisdiction. I don't know what they have exactly. I mean, that was one of the things when they cut our squad. I'm like, do you realize that your serial killer that everybody said was dead was alive and well in the middle of Phoenix, raising a daughter, functioning in society, driving around to these comic. I'm like, do you realize that everybody thought he was dead? That was the big thing, and I think I put that in my book. Is he's dead? You're wasting your time. Give up. You guys are fools. So yeah. I mean, to me, he is a phenomenal study as far as a serial killer, with reverence for the families of the girls, like of course the victims.
Well, you said you wound up looking into so many possible cases that were connected to this. And I guess it was Brandy Myers was the one you just didn't have quite enough evidence to be able to charge him with that.
Yeah, I mean, that was something on the back end. Once we had interviewed him and then we interviewed simultaneously his ex-wife, she kind of spilled the beans on the Brandy Myers case. One of the detectives that worked that, Stu Summershoe, is a phenomenal detective. And he beat that case up and worked it very hard and presented it to the county attorney. And it's just a no-body homicide. So they unfortunately, too much time had passed and they weren't able to go forward and prosecute it. So I guess the justice is he's on death row, and that's the justice for Brandy.
Yes, definitely. What is his status on death row? I mean, obviously he's on death row, but I mean, is there any time frame like we'll check back in 15 years? I mean, I know they have 1 million appeals and all of that.
Yeah, I think the appeals, and they've been executing a few here and there that I've seen in the headlines. So I don't know how long that's going to take. But yeah, he definitely is entitled to his appeal. But again, I'm no attorney, but he basically admitted to this in court. He said, hey, I did these murders, but it wasn't me. It was all these psychological things that basically created this kind of Jekyll and Hyde disassociative defense. So I don't know how you kind of walk that back.
Yeah, that's nonsense. I'm sorry. I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm not going to hold back. That's absolute nonsense. Yeah, I was insane, didn't know what I was doing, and I don't remember this.
Right. I blacked out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't believe that for a minute. One of the things I saw when you did your presentation at Cold Case was the art he had on his refrigerator. Can you describe that a little bit? Because it was shocking to me.
Something that we read in the files as we sifted through them was that basically there was a theory that Brian had taken our first victim's head and either refrigerated or put it in the freezer. And because the level of decomposition was not, he basically took her head from the scene that night, and then 10 days later he put it in the canal, and that's when it was found, or it was found in the canal. And we had experts opine that the level of decomposition was not consistent. So it definitely they believed it had to be refrigerated or frozen. In essence, what we saw at his house was he had artwork basically depicting a head in the freezer, which is awful. And it's awful. Another is his 15-year-old daughter lived with him, and she had to look at that every day.
Yeah. I mean, he's a hoarder. The house was disgusting. And at the same time, he's thinking about he's such a good dad. I'm saying, man, have you actually looked at where you're living? I mean, oh my God, the people tasked at going through that house looking for evidence. People, when I'm telling you that this place, he was a hoarder, it's ceiling to floor covered with junk, garbage, trash, rotting food. It was disgusting. And you had to have a team go in there and look for evidence. Oh, God bless them.
Yeah, they spent at least a solid week and a half out there. We had to rent some pods to basically try to pull the evidence out, photograph it, package it, and then there was another step when I got back to our crime lab to actually impound it. So it was a massive undertaking, and God bless those detectives that went through that and lived it. Not just 8 hours a day, but they were there pretty much from dusk to dawn, and then some, doing that, and then just making sure that if there were any other victims or evidence from our crimes, that we wouldn't miss it.
Oh yeah, you had to go through. I cannot even imagine. These people are good people, because I just looked at the pictures and was just, oh no, sorry, I could not do that. Oh, it was just awful. The other thing, as you're wrapping up the book and you're talking about the trial, and he's pleading, innocent by reason of, or not guilty by reason of insanity, is that he makes himself out to be the victim.
Yeah, that was something that I really give a lot of credit to the lead prosecutor, Vince Verdino. He wanted to kind of draw it back in his closing arguments, and he put both victims' photos up. And to this day, I still kind of get choked up because he brought it back to them and said, this trial is not about Brian Miller, and this trial is about these two girls, and they are the true victims. And her sister, Melanie's sister, Jill, kind of took it back. She said, if you had tuned into this case and missed the first part of it, and just tuned into it, you think Brian was the true victim. And again, Melanie and Angela were savagely murdered. And Brian, yes, had a rough childhood, but that doesn't give him a pass to be this awful, sadistic serial killer.
I'm sad for the child that Brian was. I am. But like you said, that does not give you license to go out and inflict your fantasies by slaughtering other people. It just doesn't work that way. And he had a choice. And again, I go back to that. I'm such a good dad. I'm such a good father. Well, you're on death row. No, you weren't a good father. You lived in a horrible situation that you're raising your daughter. Here she's a teenager living in this house. And you've got heads in your... Oh, please. Yeah, I'm not a fan of his.
And the fact that he had... If things are basically lined up, that he killed Brandy while the poor Mennonite church had taken him in. He had killed her inside of their basically apartment they had given him. And I think the poor church ladies had to clean up and deal with the stench of her dead body, which is off the chart horrific for them, good church-going people and trying to help them.
Yeah, you're trying to help somebody, give them a place to live, and, you're hiding dead bodies. Oh, yeah. I have to ask this too, because I taught psychology for 30 years. How did you guys, not all of you should all have PTSD. I mean, just from dealing with the crime scene pictures, you're dealing with all of these awful cases. Are you okay? I mean, really?
Well, I always joke, it depends who you ask. But yeah, I mean, I think we really try to, I tried particularly to spend time with my family and kind of concentrate on what's important, but yeah, you can't unsee anything, what was done to those girls and just the images of all the cold cases that we looked at. So, and I think, the public looks at it, they'll catch a Netflix episode or a Dateline or one of those, and they feel sad, but it, it 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 really is impactful to the families, obviously, and then the detectives don't get enough credit for seeing all this stuff and then having to just carry forward through their day after day after day. So
Yeah. I sound like a broken record, but you're heroes. You're in these awful situations dealing with these horrific crimes day in and day out. It's not like they say, okay, we're going to do nice crimes next week. They're awful. And you're trying to bring, like I said, that word closure, but you're trying to at least bring justice to these families so they can understand what happened to their loved ones. And I think we underestimate the toll that it does take. And I don't think we appreciate as much as we should.
yeah, I mean, I grew up in a smaller town, Decatur, Illinois. I was largely, soybeans and corn, and had a good upbringing. Wasn't sheltered by any means, but was not exposed to what I would see when I came out here. And I worked a pretty rough, violent precinct out of the gate, and saw just the worst of humanity. And it's really hard to see that, 10 hours a day plus, and then just kind of put on, a normal hat and say, oh, I'm fine. That doesn't affect me. So kudos to all those men and women in blue that have taken kind of a bad rap. And there's a few bad apples out there doing bad things, but for the majority are really taking one for the team every single day.
Yeah, I have to agree with that 100%. So I want to ask you that this book is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm highly recommending it. I'll be doing a review. What are you doing next? Because you said there are 2,500 cases and you solved several hundred, last I heard. So was there another book coming?
Possibly. So what kind of was the catalyst to this particular book was they decided, the leadership at the time at the Phoenix Police Department, again, I say at the time, decided due to budget cuts that they were going to cut and dismantle the cold case homicide squad, which sent me into I wouldn't say a depression, but it was definitely a kick in the teeth, because how could we develop this recipe for solving cold cases and this great partnership with a lab and reviewing cases, and we were solving 12 to 15 cases a year dating back to the 70s, and then all of a sudden just say, poof, you're gone. You're going back to patrol, Troy. And it's like, what? Why? Why doesn't this guy from community relations playing volleyball with kids go back? I think murders are more important, and missing persons and sexual assaults. So that kind of was the catalyst. So I've kind of gone on this crusade of a sorts of, it's in the back of me, the cold cases matter, because I really believe that families need help in advocating. You've got to have talented, hardworking detectives. You can't just grab some volunteers and say, hey, Bob, would you come in and sift through these files? You need dedicated people looking at these cases. It's important. You can't turn your back at the 1 year mark and just say, oh, we're done. We tried. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm a consultant. I'm a volunteer for Parents of Murdered Children at the national level. And I'm also on the Silent Witness Board, just trying to help. But as far as another book, I actually want to kind of try fiction, because nonfiction is, as you know, is very difficult. And this took years in the making. A first-time author gets kind of laughed out of the building when you're trying to get an agent, when you're trying to get a publisher, because it's so much easier to self-publish these days, and it's no denigration on people that do that. That's fine. But I wanted to kind of swing for the fences, to use a baseball analogy, and I wanted it to be at a broader level. And I went through 6 months of no's from literary agents around the country, and then about a year and a half trying to pitch it for them. Lindsay was awesome, picked me up, my agent, and then trying to pitch it to a publisher. And luckily, Pegasus Crime, Simon Schuster, basically picked me up. So it's hard as a first time author. And then, kudos to the James Pattersons and the Ann Rules and the people that have done really well. But it's so difficult. So many books out there. And that would kind of be my message would be, please, if you like the book, please give me a review. I think it helps with the algorithms on Amazon, on Goodreads, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Murder Bookies, I want you to definitely go out, buy the book, do the reviews. Just like Troy said, you have homework. If you wind up doing some fiction, let me know.
Okay. Awesome. I've got something in the works right now. So
I have to get away from true crime every once in a while, but my problem is I like crime stories and I like mysteries and solving cases. So my palate cleanser is, of course, crime fiction. So, because that's at least not real.
Right.
I can just and just enjoy the story for story's sake. All right. I want to say thank you for doing this. Well, I appreciate it. This has been so great. Troy, thank you.
It's been great meeting you, and thank you for having me. I very much appreciate it.
It has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Dee, you're the best.
Thank you. Again, I hope you feel better.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. Well, there you have it, my interview with author and retired Sergeant Troy A. Hillman. I always appreciate the perspective of the authors and the investigators and the backstory of how these books actually come about. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation and got an appreciation for his ability to storytell. Chasing Down the Zombie Hunter is highly recommended by me, so you can pick it up at Amazon or any place, Barnes & Noble, wherever. Now, my next book is Incendiary, The Psychiatrist, the Mad Bomber, and the Invention of Criminal Profiling by Michael Cannell. This is the case that first made me notice criminal profiling, and finding a book to get all of the details was like manna from heaven. What a gift. It is the 1940s, and President Franklin Roosevelt is in the White House. I'll Never Smile Again by Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra, featuring up-and-coming Frank Sinatra, and Glenn Miller's In the Mood were at the top of the song charts that year. And a serial bomber is stalking the streets of New York City. Pausing the bombings while the U.S. was at war, the bomber resumed his deadly obsession, bombing New York City in 1951 as an explosion erupted in Grand Central Terminal, then Radio City Music Hall, and over, maiming victims, as he is called the greatest individual menace New York City ever faced. The race to catch him would give birth to a new science called criminal profiling, and capturing a monster would forever change the face of law enforcement. So please join me as we look back into this frightening and pivotal story of the Mad Bomber. Thank you for listening. I see you as you hear me. And my next episode will drop in 2 weeks. I love hearing from you, so you can email me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or find me on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also join my Patreon for $2 to $4 a month, and my serial killer class is still ongoing. So don't miss us at the first Thursday of the month, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Always trust your gut, murder bookies. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.